but this kind of all feeds into this next one, and it's this understanding of the drive towards servitization. Again, to quote Martin, I think the servitization needs to be top-down leadership, and if you have a CEO and leadership team who believe in servitization, this changes everything. Again, that's echoing Christo's point as well. Often it is the case that in a previous company, CEOs have already seen the impact, and they don't want to wait until a do or die moment. They want the scenario to evolve naturally, I guess. Jan, often within companies, everything can be so short-term orientated. If that is the attitude of top and middle management, then innovations will never flourish, because such projects are just a disturbance of what is really important, which is hitting your monthly and quarterly numbers. And I think that's an incredibly valid point. And again, that echoes what Kieran's saying there as well on the previous slide. Daniel, one of the things, I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit, and Koen's talked a little bit to this as well, about the conversation to have with customers, how we select those right customers, how we hear the voice of the customer and we can react to that. One of the other challenges is how to have this conversation internally, and quite often, you know, in our sector, when we're at the conferences, you know, hopefully we'll all be back in conferences soon enough. But when we're having sessions like this as well, you know, we're talking to service leadership. We're talking to people that live and breathe and understand our language. And quite often it's the service or aftermarket director that will see the value of a servitized approach. They can see the customer that's right there. They can see that it's something to go for. Yeah, it's communicating it internally. Almost every example I've seen, to echo what Martin's said there, is that it has to be top driven down. I mean, but that's not just the conversation, is it? It's having the conversation internally, getting buy-in from the engineers, it's getting buy-in from your middle management. You know, as somebody that talks to a lot of operations leads from the practitioner side, from industry, have you got any kind of comment around that in terms of how to best hold that conversation internally and to kind of put the point across of what is servitization? Because beyond these small walls, it seems sometimes we're speaking a foreign language. What's your thoughts, Daniel?
Sure. I think it's interesting because you can't have this piece without the previous slide, right? And having the comment you said to Kieran about tiger teams and he made about buy-in on across all areas of the organization, I think is key. You have to have all of those different players into the groups, have everyone bought in. And if we think about basic change management skills, right, you have your project champions, you have your laggards, you have all those other ones. You want to make sure that you have champions essentially for servitization across the business, right? And that's at the field service engineer level, that's at the senior leadership executive level, and that's obviously at the service leader level. I think the thing that's hugely important is making sure that, as I believe that was Christo on the previous slide said, that you know, having a seat at the table. So it's not being directed from any one individual. It's making sure it's that conversation across all areas of the organization that everyone's bought in. I think one of the things that if we think about servitization is understanding for all of these individuals you know, what it is that is actually going to change about the business, and it's going to be focusing on those areas of customer intimacy, operational excellence, and product leadership, right? So it's understanding all of those pieces, and then the value that will be generated for each of their areas of the business, right? So understanding you know, how it's going to make a field service engineer's life easier, how it's going to make the supply chain easier to run, and they don't have to constantly be reactionary. They can be more proactive in getting the parts out to the team. It's understanding the financial benefits that are going to be seen from making this change within an organization, to present that up to the senior leadership team as well. So it's really showing the value across all areas of the business so that everyone is bought in and running toward the same goal.
Yeah. I one follow-up question, if I can put that to you first, Daniel, and then Koen or Kieran, if you want to chip in as well before we kind of move on to this next section. But Daniel, I mean, one of the things that we keep seeing, and we've seen it here across these last two slides, as you say, is that executive voice, that voice in the executive room, rather. you know, it's having service have that seat at the executive table. And we are starting to see more and more service savvy CEOs as well. But are these the outliers, you know, in terms of these organizations like Autotech or like Howden? You know, are these the outliers that have got that voice? Is there still a battle to get service kind of that voice at the executive table? Or are you seeing, and this is just in general, are you seeing a kind of service get more gravitas in the boardroom, I guess? Dan, if I can put that to you first, and then Kieran or Coen, if you want to come in on that.
So the simple answer is yes, right? So they are the outliers, I think. Often what I see if I'm working with someone that's looking to make a change in this is, you know, you've got that mid-level senior leader in service that knows there needs to make a change, and I work with them to help structure a business case around what that change would be, so that they can then present it and help convince, you know, the executive team of the value of making this change, right? So I think that they still don't always have a seat at the table. When they do, it's fantastic. It makes the whole transformation much easier and smoother, because they are all in. They do see the value, but it is still a challenge for a number of organizations convincing their leadership team that they do need to make this change. Now, I think that there is a shift, and we can see some of that shift growing, but it is still a challenge for many organizations.
Okay. Good. I could see you grinning. Oh, Kieran, please.
Well, so you can't see me because I still can't get my technical issues sorted. But I was just going to say I agree with Daniel's statement. But I also add that there is a change now for many businesses, or starting to change. It probably was a little bit earlier in the IT world, but now it's hitting the rest of the world as well. Is this change from having two CSOs, as in a chief service officer and a chief sales officer? And obviously the chief sales officer was generally on that table before the service guy ever got there. But now there's a change where those two CSOs are disappearing, and you're ending up with a chief revenue officer. And by having a chief revenue officer, now all of a sudden they're focusing on where revenue comes from and where it exists. And that's giving service, it's giving service a move away from after sales to actually its own element of service, or, you know, however you want to put it. And if you are moving to a truly outcome-based services, you know, when you get to that element that you're no longer selling your product, you're actually selling as a service, then that changes the whole profile again. You know, if you're not selling the product, you don't need a chief sales officer. You know, you're selling as a service, so you need someone to look after that revenue and understand that need and how that works between the product and the actual service that you provide, whatever that be.
That's a really interesting point. Really interesting point. Go on, sorry, please.
Kris, I'm very indoctrinated, as Kieran mentioned, because I don't even think of CSO as anything but chief service officer anymore. And I always think you've got the chief service officer and you've got the chief revenue officer. And I think that he really hit it on the nail on the head there with that. It's a shift in thinking for organizations. That's what they really have to do, is change the way they're looking at the relationships with their customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I really think that both Kieran, Kieran and Daniel are correct from an internal field service organization perspective, that all these dynamics are important. But in answering what is driving the move to servitization, I would say a launching customer. For instance, I think the most quoted servitization offering is Power by the Hour by Rolls-Royce. But Rolls-Royce developed that service offering not because they thought it was such a good idea, but in 1958, it was the Royal Air Force said, we want to have more predictable models, so we want to buy it from you, so you develop it for us. So I think tapping into the mindset of the customer and see if you can find a launching customer, I think that is a very good addition to all the internal alignment just by the CEO, CRO, or CSO.